вас все одно камера не побачить. Камери не.
It's August 3rd. Ukraine Media Center Confirm continues its operation. My name is Svetlana Cheparenko. We're starting our briefing about the new Ukraine's facility by European Commission to support Ukraine. This year, European Commission announced the creation of a new facility to support recovery, rebuilding, and modernization of Ukrainian economy. It's contemplated to be in amount of up to 50 billion euro for years 2024-2027. It will support Ukraine in countering Russian aggression and in recovery of the modern state. So we will be talking about this facility with Viola von Cramon, member of the European Parliament, vice chair of the delegation of the EU-Ukraine Parliamentary Association Committee.
Hello, and thank you everyone for today's attendance at our press conference and press briefing here in Kyiv today. As you have introduced, I'm a member of the European Parliament. I'm a vice chair of the EU-Ukraine Delegation for the Parliamentary Association Committee. And I'm dealing with Ukraine not only since yesterday, but since '96. So I have been to Ukraine many times. I've seen very different political developments here in Ukraine. And I have to say, it's always like coming back to Ukraine. This country is very close to my heart. And people in this country, the citizens of Ukraine, are very close to my heart. And I can also speak on behalf of my colleagues in the European Parliament while we are working hard from day one of the full-scale invasion of Russia to Ukraine. But not only since then. I have to say that we actually were in favor of supporting Ukraine even before the 24th of February 2022. And also many of my colleagues were in favor of supporting Ukraine with military equipment, hardware equipment, to protect the country much before February 2022. This is important to explain. This is important to explain that even we focus now with the so-called Ukraine facility on the next phase, on the reconstruction phase, on the modernization phase, the priority for all of us is, first of all, to win the war, to defeat Russia military on the battleground, to liberate all the territory, to make sure that the people in Ukraine can live in freedom and liberty on the entire territory of Ukraine. I think this is very much important to mention at the very beginning. Second of all, yes, we speak about the reconstruction, but we furthermore speak about the desire of the people in Ukraine of becoming a member of the European Union, of becoming European citizens as such. And we know this is not a short-term approach. I would like to make sure that everyone understands we are just in the warming up phase for a marathon. We are not speaking about a 1 or 2 years procedure. We are speaking about a procedure which might take a couple of years. I don't want to be too, let's say, concrete in terms of numbers, but I'm afraid that even countries such as Finland, which joined the European Union under complete different circumstances, which had good governance in place. We speak about 5 or 7 million people, and it took Finland 3.5 years. So when we speak about the procedure now and under this very difficult military security political situation in and around Ukraine, I think we have to be realistic that now it is important for us to start the accession talks before the end of the year. And then we need to see that on one hand, it is a technical procedure, but on the other hand, it is a very lengthy, also political procedure. And these negotiations normally will take time. So Ursula von der Leyen, ahead of the conference, the donors conference in London, has come up with a proposal to start to bring to Ukraine money in different pillars. And of course, we speak a lot, we speak about the 50 billion Ukrainian facility, which means on one hand, we need to see in Ukraine a Ukrainian plan which should be set up by the Ukrainian people and not just by the government. And that is also important, at least for us in the European Parliament, that this needs to be set up in a democratic process. We need to see that this is inclusive, that there is the civil society included, that this is being facilitated together with the opposition in the parliament. And of course, we need to make sure that the criteria which are set up by the European Commission are met as much as possible. So we speak about 3 pillars. We speak about the support for the Ukraine plan. We speak about the Ukraine investment framework, and we speak about the assistance program. In terms of the timeline, the proposal from the Commission is set up on the 20th of June. We in the European Parliament will debate and have a first debate in the AFET, in the Committee for Foreign Affairs, at the end of August, which is very quick. And then we have 1 week for submitting amendments. So all groups, I'm the shadow rapporteur for the Green Group, we will have 1 week for submitting the amendments. And then we will negotiate together with all groups in the European Parliament the final text of the European Parliament, and this should be voted hopefully in the end of November. Then there will be the trialogue. In the beginning of next year, we hope to disseminate the money. That is in general how this is planned. But that does not mean that if we have agreed on the Ukraine facility, that there is, as I said at the beginning, there is accession tomorrow. So from there on, we need to start step by step, looking at the different cluster, looking at rule of law, looking at democratic institution, looking at the environmental policies and so on. So we have the EU acquis on one side, and we have the current situation in Ukraine on the other side, and we have to narrow down and bring the entire legislative framework of Ukraine as close as possible to the EU acquis in the most speedy time. Let's put it that way. Maybe I can stop for now, and we will have the rest in the FNQ session.
Yes, thank you. Tell us, please, what industries this facility will support?
Pardon me?
What industries this facility will support?
Well, that depends, of course, very much on the concrete, I would say, conditions, which security we might give. I mean, so far, what we understood from the Commission's proposal, but I've also spoken to some expert here in Ukraine. It's not really 100% sure which industry in the end might join and might go into the risk and might invest here. But I've heard in London and I've heard in other capitals that there is an interest, but it always depends on the conditions which might be given as an insurance for the industry. But for example, I could imagine we speak about agriculture, we speak about companies who are essential for crops, input goods, and there seems to be an openness and interest, for example, to come to Ukraine. In terms of, I know that construction site, building material, everything is very much needed here. I could imagine those companies would be very much interested to be in the first phase. But myself, we have of course not spoken to individual industries or representatives of industries.
Thank you. Are there any requirements for Ukraine to receive this money from year to year?
Well, yes, there are a couple of requirements. I think it is important to say that the plan which is being set up at the moment says clearly that it is not just the executive power which might then determine the money, how this is disseminated to the project. Of course, they are setting up the plan, but we will include, and this will be part of our text for the Ukraine facility coming from the European Parliament, we will include other actors in here as well. We will look at the municipalities, the cities, the regions. These are the actors who know much better than everyone here in the central place in Kyiv what is needed for the people on the ground. Civil society is crucial, especially when it comes to sustainable building. We need to see how you can build up a climate-neutral living places, residential places, office places, industries, and so on. And therefore, we need different branches from the civil society. We need architecture. We need different experts, think tanks, to bring together this knowledge, but also to see how much we can, especially when we speak about circular economy, recycling. There is now a big chance for Ukraine to be a test ground for a complete new approach of building up a city, building up a settlement, building up villages. In terms of digitalization, Ukraine is much more ahead of us. At least for me as a German, it is always embarrassing to see what is possible in Ukraine compared to my home country, Germany, and also to many other countries. So we can see, we can learn from the digital standards here in Ukraine. This is definitely a big plus. But on the other hand, we need to strengthen institutions, building up institutions. Some of them had been here before the martial law, to make sure that all the voices which are crucial for the reconstruction phase are being heard before we finally disseminate the money.
And how will this 50 billion euros will be distributed to Ukraine during these 4 years? And you said that Ukraine can get first tranche in this beginning of the next year. And when will be the next tranches?
Well, that depends very much on the procedure. I think what I've heard so far is that for the first pillar, for the so-called Ukraine plan, it is 12 billion per year, which means 36 billion altogether. And then there will be 14 billion, which I think will be split off in 9 and 5, but it's not up to me to decide anything now. I'm just repeating what is being, let's say, drafted so far. But how this in the end will be disseminated, who will be the institution who will finally pay the money to the final beneficiary, that is not clear yet. In the European Union, we have paying agencies, for example, when you're a farmer, when you are in a local community receiving funds from the European Union, there is a certified agency who is then paying the money. One could think of creating something like this here as well, in each region, creating this. I don't know how much into detail this is already predetermined at that moment, but it is of course clear that as a member of the Budget Control Committee in the European Parliament, we will try to track the money as much as possible, because it is in the interest of the Ukrainian people, it's in the interest of our taxpayers in the European Parliament to see where the money is gone and for which projects the money is spent or invested.
Thank you, Mrs. Viola. I will let journalists ask them questions. Колеги, чи є запитання?
Доброго дня, Надія Юрченко.
Just a second. Once again, good afternoon, Nadia Yurchenko, Ukrinform. I wanted to ask a small question. When evaluating some specific projects, whether they're worth investing in or not, are you going to rely on the opinion of our democratic institutions on the ground, or will there be a European institution that will assess whether they comply with the requirements or they are just the same as they always have been? Thank you.
Well, this is a very good question, a very important question. Of course, it will be not the European Union deciding on any particular projects. That's for sure. This will be not the case. It's not our decision which company or which sector will get the money. What we will do is we will give, hopefully, and we will negotiate a framework how, for example, emission standards can be upheld, and how much, for example, money needs to go to female entrepreneurs, how much we would like to spend into traumatized psychological recovery projects or something like this, that we do not say one particular project will be determined by the European Union, but that we also come up with the framework, the political framework, the financial framework, the environmental framework, which then says, yes, we need to see that buildings have a certain standards, that all the groups of the society have equal access to the money, to the financement, to the funds, and so on. So this will be our role, to have an oversight of how the procedure is being organized here. And in the best place, we have institutions in Ukraine already set up who work very closely with the European partners. But it will be not us determine where the money goes.
Прошу ще запитання.
Добрий день.
Any more questions? Good afternoon. Welcome to Ukraine. Ms. Viola, thank you for your support. I have a couple of questions regarding allocation of the funds. European Union set a requirement for Ukraine, the requirement of control of spending the funds. Can you please disclose details about the mechanism to be created either in European Union, or should Ukraine create such mechanism with with European monitors. So what will be the mechanism of fund spending? And another question is regarding Ukraine's accession to European Union. Back in 2014, there was a forecast of 10 years. The next year, that will be the end of the 10 years period, we have already fulfilled certain requirements, but are they enough to consider Ukraine as a full-fledged EU candidate, and how much years more do we need? Thank you.
Absolutely. I start with your second question. I think this is very crucial to understand. Indeed, after 2014, after Maidan, Ukraine has done a lot of very important and very, let's say, outstanding reforms. We speak about prosperous, the whole anti-corruption institutional setup. We have seen a very vibrant media variety, media pluralism. Many things have been really reformed in a solid way, but some of the things have been, I would say, dismantled, not completely, but had to be, had to be covered up for the time of the war. And we have to make sure, if this accession process starts, all the institutions will be reactivated, reanimated again. And we have to adapt it, as I said before, to the European acquis. And that is a long procedure. Yes, Ukraine has done a lot, but when we look at media freedom at the moment, when we look at the independence of the judiciary, as I said, I work in Ukraine since '96, but nevertheless, the independence of the judiciary is still lacking. We still have a couple of questions. I know some reforms and some progress have been made even despite the war. There's no question about this, and that is good to see. That is reassuring. But when I look at other sectors, especially when it comes to, let's say, multi-party pluralism right now in the parliament, that's a bit more difficult, that's a bit tricky. I don't want to go into detail, but this needs to be improved when the war is over, and we will keep and watch it very carefully. So yes, Ukraine is on a good track, and it might be quicker than 10 years. You said from 2014 on, we said 10 years. Now we got the war. I guess we will see how much we can develop together. It might be 5 years, might be 7 years, whatsoever, but I see there's a big ambition from the Ukrainian people, from everyone in this country, to make it as quick, to speed up as much as possible. This is absolutely obvious, and that is highly appreciated by everyone in Brussels. Regarding your first questions, yes, there will be an independent board, so to say. This will be set up, what I understood, mainly by Ukrainians, but also by some independent international representatives. But how the mechanism in detail will work, I'm not sure whether this is already finalized. So the procedure, of course, will be that the plan from the Ukrainian side, the priorities which are set up from the Ukrainian side will be as transparent as possible, so that what I understand is there is a digital way of following this plan. This is super helpful. There is no question about that. But then one must also look into the details of this plan. And to get access to this, I think some details must be negotiated. But in general, I think the approach is right.
Roxolana Lisovska, UAPBC. Dear Viola, my questions are not directly about reconstructions, but also about money. So first question, I saw that the European Parliament intends to confiscate the frozen assets of the Russian Central Bank. So how, as it's part of the 12th package of sanctions, how was this done and what were the obstacles? And the second one about sanctions, how the European institutions monitor the implementation of this package packages, because Russia still can have this money for weapons?
Wow, a very important question as well. I'm so sorry to say that the freezing and the confiscation of the central bank money plus all the individual assets of different, let's call them Russian businessmen, it was one thing, but to transfer this money and the assets into a reparation mechanism, a sanction and a reparation mechanism is not that easy. Ursula von der Leyen, the Commission, her team, they're working on a legal solution for quite some time. It is not so easy, something which is really so proof that it would hold before court. So that's why it's a very lengthy process. But of course, Ursula von der Leyen had said in London that she expects 300 billion of this frozen assets, not just from the central bank, but maybe also from Russian business people, from individuals who are sanctioned now, will go into this fund. Some of us and some of the legal advisors say we would be very cautious. I think it would be better to prepare our taxpayers and our people in the European Union that they might pay more than we get out of this fund, because it's a very delicate legal question, and whether we can really 300 billion of the Russian money, I'm not so sure. That's why I think it is a bit, how to say, it's not a number we can really calculate on. Yeah. Your second question was about?
Sanctions,
Oh, yeah. That is up to the individual member states. And also here, I have to admit, my home country, Germany, is not a good role model for that. So we have a lot of companies circumventing the sanctions, working together with countries such as Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Georgia, Armenia, Turkey, and so on. I think that everyone is aware of that now. I think that there will be put controlling measures, they will put controlling measures in place, but so far it is still extremely difficult to sanction those violations. But at least the awareness brings, how to say, another level of political will to stop that. So a lot of shuttle diplomacy has taken place from Brussels, from Berlin, from other capitals to make sure that those countries, which I have just mentioned, and Central Asia, South Caucasus, are aware of the political risk they are facing. So at one point, the US, Canada, the EU might think about secondary sanctions, and this will hit those countries extremely hard. On the other hand, we in the European Union, in the member states, have to do more to really sanction and to fine those companies who deliberately circumvent the sanctions, and that had not taken place. Sometimes they were like reminded friendly, but this is not enough. It needs definitely much more, and I can just disclose in our government in Germany, so far there was not a political will from all sides. But we need to work on that, and it's not just true for Germany, it's true for many other countries as well.
Володимир Сонюк.
Volodymyr Senyuk, Political and Culture Work Center.
Ukraine will need not only to restore houses, bridges, roads, but there will be need to build a powerful defense wall on the border with Russia and Belarus. Something like Poland built on the border with Belarus lately. It is not millions but billions dollars. Is there some understanding in European countries, in European Parliament, that these funds might have to be given to Ukraine, because otherwise we will be in danger and there will be no sense to restore roads or bridges or houses when Russia in any moment can invade once more?
Well, a very legitimate question, to be honest. I'm not naive, but myself, I'm from the former western part of Germany, and I was never in favor of building walls. So for me, to think about now to build a wall again in Europe, wherever this is not a very promising outlook. So what we think is, of course, helping Ukraine to join NATO, making sure that you have security, you have protection, whatever it needs to make sure that no bigger neighbor will ever invade your country once again. This needs to be clear from the very beginning. About building walls, using this as how to say, as another how to say it, another bottleneck, and to also for Belarus, for example, I still see that it's a very European country. It is a country when Lukashenko is hopefully out of office at some point. It might be reconstructed, it might be brought into, not to the European Union immediately, but from the people's mind, it is very close to the European Union. So we should actually reach out to those people who are ready to transform their country in a civilized manner. Yes, I know that Russia will be a threat. This will not go away. And as I said, I'm not naive. I don't think a wall will help you. The only thing which helps you is protection, it's security, it's military security, and that is our responsibility. We need to make sure that our leaders in Brussels, in Washington, in Ottawa, in capitals of the European Union understand that, and will allocate a certain amount of money each year that this security threat is being condemned. But I don't think that a wall itself will keep the neighbor away. I mean, looking at the air raid every night, even a wall wouldn't protect you against this shelling and the rockets. So we have to be much smarter. And the more and the faster Ukraine develops as a democratic country, as a full democratic country, as the Ukrainians ask you to, if you see the polls, if you see the service, apart from defeating Russia, what Ukrainian people want is to become a European country. And this is what we are working on, and this is what we are heading for, and that is what we would like to support. Institutional setup for becoming a real democratic country.
Прошу ще запитання.
Ms. Viola, thank you for coming. Really, we are lucky to have.
More questions?
Thank you very much. So the thing is about this global investment plan for Ukraine is that it could take place only after actually the war ends, right? Or a kind of peaceful agreement with Russia or something like that. I don't know how we'll call it, but I assume that there will be something. But we still need to support Ukrainian economy during the war, right? So right now, not only to give fish to the Ukrainians, but to give the fishing rod as well, right? And to give this fishing rod is to give an opportunity to grow up our GDP by ourselves somehow. And for example, Bayraktar TB2 enterprise settlement as an example, and Rheinmetall enterprise as an example also. I mean that this is possible to support Ukrainian economy, to support our GDP during the war somehow. So are there any discussions inside the EU among your colleagues that we also need to have a plan of Ukrainian economy support during the war? Maybe some areas, some fields which are actual, because we do have those examples that this is possible. This is the one question, and very briefly the second one. Regarding the plan that was presented by the Ukrainian side in London, so we understand that different types and fields of economy have different this yield curve, right? So I mean different areas of economy affects the GDP in a different way, right? So high technologies areas affects in a good way, and for example agriculture affects not in a positive way, right? So have you heard the assessment from the European experts of this plan which was presented by Ukraine? How do they think it could affect Ukrainian GDP from the 5 or 10 years perspective if this plan will be launched? This is my question.
Regarding your first question, it's good to see you here, Taras. Regarding your first question, this is exactly what Pillar 2 in the facility is all about. The idea is encouraging companies and industries to come to Ukraine to invest under this difficult situation while the war is going on. So using this with the international financial institution to scale up the investment. You have mentioned Rheinmetall. I have said before there are also bigger agriculture, transnational companies who might be interested in coming, construction, building material industries and so on. So something which does not need a big investment. I mean, Rheinmetall is in negotiations. I know this, and it would be, I think, even I'm not a press speaker of the defense industry, don't get me wrong here, but I think this would be a good investment and it would be a win-win situation, of course. Well, regarding the reactions from the European side towards the plan, I have no details about that. I can't give you any more hints than what you might have heard behind the scenes so far. I have heard that in general everyone is rather satisfied with the level of progress. There's no question about that, but what we have spoken about during the last 2.5 days I have been here to Kyiv is that we need a Team Europe from the Ukrainian side in Brussels as well. We have a very strong, of course, embassy, but when we really start with a negotiation, we would be more, we would need more a think tank from the Ukrainian side, also based in Brussels. And also, of course, the Commission has set up a big unit in Brussels working only on Ukraine, vertical and horizontal through all the commissions. And we need to make sure that we from the European Parliament, together with those people from this unit, are visible here, approachable here, and we have this constant exchange from demands, from expectations from both sides, so that there is no miscommunication on the halfway through. But you're absolutely right. I think it is firstly to appreciate that the Ukrainian side is very much proactive.
Колеги, чи є ще запитання? So, Mrs. Viola, thank you very much for
Dear colleagues, do we have any more questions on the floor?
personal support from European Union. So we are waiting for you here in Media Center Ukraine Forum for more details when this program will be approved. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Я нагадаю, що з нами була Віола фон Крамон, депутатка Європейського парламенту, заступниця голови делегації парламентського комітету Асоціації Україна-ЄС. А Медіа-центр Україна-Укрінформ повернеться до роботи завтра. Слідкуйте за анонсами.